so impressed. And I was thinking, why am I here to be invited as a host? They're so awesome. I don't even know if I can do it. But anyway, I'm here. So, and I like to say that I've already posted their bios in our chat box. So if you would like to learn more about our wonderful guest speakers, you can check our chat box. And as you know, as all of our audience have noticed, that all of our speakers for the Fishbowl section are the youth, and they're here to share their stories. And today we're mainly going to talk about how we understand our childhood and how we have bridged the gap between us and our parents. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce our sponsors firstly, and thank you all so much for supporting PCE in the past few years, and we would love to see you in the next year as well. And going through the slides, and here is a brief introduction about our speakers. Alan is a graduate student from Columbia University, and Aliyah, I hope I got your name right. And I like to skip the parts introducing them because I know that they would like to talk more about themselves, and I would like to leave more time for them. So I'll just skip this page, and this is information for the audiences. And for the fishbowl part, this is a very interesting section. So fishbowl discussion is majorly about the fishes, which are our wonderful speakers who are spotlighted now, and they will give us their insights, their sharing, their stories. And there will be the fishes, and the rest of us will be the ones in the boat to observe, to listen. And you're welcome to interact as well, our audiences. And please be aware that you should show your like all the audiences should show your respect to our guest speakers. So if you have any questions, you may type in the chat box, but please do not turn your mic on. And you're invited to interact at any time, post questions, and our guest speakers will be able to see it. If they get time, they will share it with us as well. And I love to start our section with this first topic of the day would be our childhood. So this game cards are pulled out from a card game designed by a Chinese American. His name is Paul, I believe. And these game cards are designed to help to bridge the gap between the parents and the student and the kids. So I found out that those cards are very, very, how should I say it, very touching. And sometimes when I look at these questions, I realize that I don't know my parents that much yet. So I hope these are the cards that will help the guest speakers and our brilliant audiences to think of, to reflect on our relationships between the kids and the parents. Okay, so I would like to invite everyone, including our audiences, to pick a question from these cards. There are 4 cards, and start to think about it and be ready to share your story. There are 4 cards. What was your favorite food growing up? Or what was your parents' favorite food growing up? And what do you think is a lesson you want to pass on to the next generation? Or what is the most important lesson that you've learned from your parents? And this is the card. Oh, there's 2 languages. What are the most proud of in your life? What are you most proud of in your life? Okay. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that everyone can see our wonderful speaker's face. And in 1 minute, I'd like to invite all of you, all of the fishes, the speakers, to start sharing their thoughts and stories. And okay, all right. I'd go first. My favorite food growing up, my least favorite food growing up would be tofu. That's what I want to share. But when my grandpa passed away, I started to try the dishes that I made with tofu because that's his favorite food. And that's a way that I feel still connected with my grandpa. And would anybody else like to share their stories about the food or any other deep thoughts about their childhood? I have Hannah, Elena, Nick, Diana, Kevin, and Alan. I don't see Alan, but yeah. Nick?
Oh, my favorite food is probably chicken nuggets or mac and cheese. I don't really have a story behind food, but I also like eating Chinese food when my parents make it. I don't know, it's just like what they grew up eating, so tastes good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do they think about the chicken nuggets?
Oh, they're fine with it. It's kind of like all I eat.
Have they ever complained that, oh, this is not healthy? Like things like that?
No.
No.
They're kind of fine with eating like whatever I want.
Okay, that's great. All right. And anybody else wanna have answer any questions from the cards?
Well, I can. So I'm a Wuyi ethnic minority from Guizhou province. So we eat a lot of food, obviously from our province, and I was born there, and I emigrated here when I was like 9. So I mentioned this because we have this one herb called jargon, and I freaking hate it so much. It's I don't even know how to describe. I look at it and I want to vomit. And my parents are in love with it. And like every time they cook it, it just makes me want to cry. However, I think over time I learned that, like I still refuse to eat it because I really don't like the taste. But I do know that it's a big part of our ethnicity and also our province, and it's something that's very special to their sort of childhood stories and experiences. So at the very least, I tolerate it being on the table, but I do also ask that when we're going to eat it, we also eat like santang yu, like, like sour, spicy fish, or 辣子鸡, like spicy chicken, but in the Guizhou way. And then that way I can balance it out with the jargon smell.
I love this story that you're sharing, how you bared it. And I saw Kevin turn on his mic.
Yes, thank you to whoever was iPhone who said jargon tastes bad. I agree. Someone tell my parents this.
I agree with that as well. It tastes really weird, like fishy smell. Yeah, and Kevin, you have something to share?
Going off of what Diana said, I mean, I can't eat ginger. I mean, which is probably very bad, considering it's like in most dishes my parents cook. But something about it, I just like just bite into like a giant chunk of ginger. I just can't taste anything else, and I hate it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not as good of a story as Diana's, but yeah.
Oh. There's a jargon lover there. I guess there's another ginger lover there as well. Thank you for sharing that. And Hannah, you have something to share as well?
Yeah, I mean, I have a ton of favorite foods. I could talk about that forever. But there's another card that was like, what's one thing you want to pass down to the next generation? And I think one thing that I really learned from my parents that they really instilled in me was just like a sense of confidence that I think is something that if I ever had kids, like would really want to ensure that they had too. Like my dad, especially, like there was like, he would always tell me that I was like amazing and that there's nothing I can't do. And he would even push me to do things I didn't want to do. But like always with like the good intention of like, you can do this. And I feel like that really has helped me as I've gone through like high school and college and med school of just, you know, like having that faith in myself and believing that I deserve the things that I get. And I think that's sometimes kind of hard, especially for Asian people. I feel like I was very fortunate to have learned that from my parents. And I think that everyone should really feel that way.
Thank you for sharing that. And you have amazing parents. And I feel very related to what you said, that having this sense of confidence is not what every single Asian like family has. So yeah, but thank you so much for sharing it. And Alaya.
Great. Kind of wanting to go back to the food question just because I feel like out of so many things that second gen like Asian American children feel disconnected a lot of the time with their connection with Chinese culture, especially because, you know, they're not living in China and they feel, you know, separate from Chinese culture, and they feel like kind of stuck between, oh, am I American enough? Am I Chinese enough? And a lot of the times food is the one thing that we can hold on to because we interact with it a lot on a daily basis, and we can confidently say, oh, I know these foods. Oh, I like these foods. I don't like these foods. Kind of similar to Karen, my favorite food growing up was Hongshao Niao Rou, right? So the reason for that being that there was a recipe that was passed down through my family for a really long time. So I can still remember my grandpa making it, my grandma making it, my mom making it, and now my mom's teaching me to make it. So it has like a very significant place in my heart, not just because it tastes great, but also because it has a familial factor that I can kind of trace through and be like, oh yeah, my grandpa taught my mom and now my mom's teaching me. Sort of.
Thank you so much for saying that. I understand what you're saying, like how the food, like this is why I chose this card as well. Like it's a very simple, food is a very simple and common thing, but it is something that connects all of us together, like with our families and the ones that we have lost. So this is why I love to start this today's section with these questions. And we're going to talk about many other topics that might be heavier and challenging. So I'm very grateful that all of you are here and being willing to share your thoughts. And please let us know if you would like to have us turn off the recording at some point. And now we're going to talk about our second topic, which is differences and similarities. And I would like you to have a few minutes, think about these following questions, and you can pick any one of them and share, and then start to share with our audiences. The questions are, what does your childhood look like? And what about your parents? What are the challenges that are unique to you as the second generation, like Chinese immigrant? And how was it like growing up in the States or any other places other than China? And I'd like to have our audiences share your thoughts in the chat box as well. Like, what's your childhood look like, and how is that different from your children's childhood? All right. Does I said that Diana turned on her mic already. She's ready to share.
Oh, no. I just have it on by default. I can turn it. Yeah.
Oh, no. I'd like to invite you to jump in.
Okay. Well, there's two versions of this I can share. One version I would rather not be recorded. So if you want to keep the recording going, I can go for the other version.
I think what does our other co-host think? I love to hear more sincere stories, so we can pause at this point.
I can jump in. First, Diana, that was an amazing story, and so much admiration for you, and just like the amount of empathy you have for the people in your lives who weren't always the best to you. Definitely something that I'm trying to learn as well. But for me, I think I had a very, very typical like Asian, like Chinese second generation experience in my childhood. My parents loved me very much, and they were they worked very hard, and they were like at their own jobs and in their own lives. And then they really instilled on my brother and I just a sense of wanting to just excel in the things that we do. And that had its ups and downs as well. Like, I don't think I would be where I am without them, but I also think that there was a lot of pressure on us growing up because they did have such high expectations, and they didn't always, express that in the most effective and effective ways. Like, there was a lot of pressure, and sometimes it was too much. And I think that just comes from like a lot of like immigrant parents probably feel like they came all the way over here, they worked so hard to get here, and so like they want the best for us, since they did all that work for us to be here, and they want to give us all the resources so that we don't have a hard life. And I definitely appreciated that, but a lot of it, I think one thing that I've learned as I've gotten older is that putting, I think, that much pressure on your kids, and I've mentioned this like in other things I've done like this, but I think putting all that pressure on your kids and making it so that like your whole happiness revolves around your kid's success can be kind of deleterious and like painful for your kids, and puts too much pressure on them at times. But again, I'm really appreciative of like the childhood that I had, and I think that that's something that I've just like learned to be more like thoughtful about since I've gotten older. And then besides that, I think that like other challenges unique to second generation, like Chinese immigrants as teens, like probably very similar to a lot of the other people here who are panelists who grew up in the United States and had immigrant parents. I think that, like the cultural differences are definitely hard sometimes. Like there have been times where I've been like, oh, why couldn't my parents have taught me about this or about that, like music or sports or all these other things that other people's parents learn about. And I felt like I was sort of at a disadvantage there. But like it's just one of those things that kids are going to be annoying about. And if you have teens who are annoying about that right now, like they'll get over it and they'll learn to appreciate what they have. It just takes some time. But I definitely think that, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a very interesting thing that it's such a unique experience, but it's also one shared by so many of us.
Thank you so much, Hannah. You're a very appreciative person, and I'm so glad to hear the other side of the story as well. Like, of course, there's a lot of challenges and difficulties in life, and being able to keep the eyes on the things that we already have is very important as well. And I think that would turn into the strength and help us to go through the challenges. And again, I'm very thankful for Diana being so vulnerable, being so open about the vulnerability. It's very, very admirable. Thank you. And I'm just wondering if any other panelists want to reflect on that as well.
Yeah, I can go. I mean, both my parents grew up in China. My mom went to boarding school her entire life, and then my dad went and was raised basically in the countryside in Ningbo. And then my dad was raised more traditionally, but the way I was raised was like completely different. I wasn't really pressured to do anything, and I was just told the basic guidelines of how to like just basically to try my hardest, and was told like how to like think, behave, and like be independent. So I grew up in Westchester, and I lived there for 17 years of my life. And my household was me, my sister, my mom, and my dad. And I was basically raised to just pave my own path. Like I was never really like overprotected or had like a strict set of rules to follow. And like I was able to express myself in like whatever way I wanted, and had the freedom to spend my time however I wanted. So like being a second child meant that like I was less pressured to perform academically. So like I was like a decent, pretty good student. Like I got mostly A's, and like school never really stressed me out because it was not like my top priority. And I took a courselet that was like manageable, but like I still took like the maximum amount of like classes that you could take, and like almost all the hardest courses offered, other than like maybe science. And then I don't really remember much about like my early childhood, but I was always very active. And like I tried sports like baseball, basketball, snowboarding, ice hockey. But like I naturally just gravitated to being more active. And in high school, I ran like upwards of 2,000 miles a year, and maxing around like 90 miles a week. And then I biked around like 10,000 miles my senior year, maxing out at 700 miles a week, while playing sports in school. So like I did ski, track, soccer, and then indoor track, outdoor track, and cross country. And then like every year, me and my family would go on a couple of vacations, mainly to like other countries, Europe and like Asia. And then like that's how like I discovered like my parents' culture and like the way that they were raised. So then I decided to bike from New York to LA last summer, like the summer going into this year, where I raised $10,000 for medical care in third world countries. And then every other summer, I basically just like went to sleepaway camp or like went on vacation or hung out with friends. And then during the winter, to like connect with my parents, I would go on like weekly or monthly ski trips. And that's how I like learned to ski and snowboard. And then when I was younger, every year we would go to China to like visit family and like discover more cultures. And then for challenges that I faced that are unique, is balancing like learning 3 languages when I was younger. So like I would learn English and Spanish in school, and then Chinese outside of school. So then like my English was not great, like my just writing wise. And then like other than that, like I didn't really face any other challenges by being a second generation Chinese immigrant. Like my main challenge was basically just like balancing school, sleep, social life, and like sports.
Thank you so much, Nick. I'm very impressed by your story as well, how you care about charity so much and not taking things for granted. That's not what everyone has, so thank you. And I saw Alaya turn on her mic earlier on, and I'd like to invite Alaya to speak. And also I know that Kevin's leaving soon, so I'd like to have all of you share as much as possible.
A lot of my classmates do the same thing because we're all on Zoom, so we can't tell like who's about to speak. And it becomes like this weird game of like, who's gonna unmute first, until we all just crack and we all unmute at the same time, and try to speak at the same time. So no worries. But I did want to kind of continue off of Hannah's point on, the cultural struggle, because I feel like it consumes a lot of, especially like younger second generation Asian American students and children, especially if they never had the chance to grow up in China and establish that cultural connection early before moving to America, or if they were born in America and their parents emigrated from China. I think personally there was a lot of cultural struggle in my youth, especially because like being Asian wasn't as cool back when I was growing up than it is now. I guess it's more like on trend, I suppose, nowadays. But anyways, because of that, there's a perception of like cultural rejection in order to be accepted by the social majority, right? This can take the form of like eating American food, playing American sports, having like culturally American interests, rather than Chinese interests or like interests that look more Asian, because there's this kind of perception of I want to fit in, and anything that would make me look or stand out or appear different to my peers, I don't want to do that. And because of this, I really struggled a lot with accepting my Chinese side because I was so obsessed with fitting in with all my white friends, because the majority of people in my community were white. And so it was weird to have packed lunches with baozi and like little Asian like Chinese snacks. And it was much more common to have like a Lunchables or something. And so I experienced this like rejection of Chinese culture where I completely like didn't want anything to do with like Chinese culture. I didn't want to eat Chinese food. I didn't want to learn Chinese. I didn't want anything to do with it because like that to me made me stand out and be rejected by like my peers at school, which at the time seemed more important, but obviously it's not. And there was a struggle throughout my life to find a balance between my Chinese American and American culture as a Chinese American. And I think throughout the years, it's been a lot easier to accept both cultural identities as I've grown older and begun to accept both sides of, you know, the cultures that have shaped me to become who I am. But I think for young children, that journey looks different in everyone. And like that acceptance can be difficult, especially if you think that you're alone in that battle. But something I've learned is that, similar to what Hannah said, it's a unique journey, but it's something that is shared with, I think, all Chinese Americans. And you really find strength and camaraderie in, you know, your shared stories and your shared childhood through that.
Thank you for sharing about that, Alea. I agree with you. It's a very unique journey, but there's a lot of shared feelings and struggles behind that. Thank you for being so courageous to share it. And Kevin, would you like to talk more about yourself as well?
Oh yeah, I think my childhood was pretty similar to what Alea and Hannah both described. I definitely felt that pressure to conform to, you know, because I did grow up in like, not already white, say, but, you know, there definitely didn't have many Asian classmates. And I definitely felt that pressure to conform to like, you know, American culture, I guess. But then at the same time, I think I felt the pressure to also conform to Chinese culture. And there was definitely a balancing act with that. Like I guess many of the other panelists have probably have been to Chinese school on weekends and have had to go through all of that. And there was always this clear distinction between, I guess, whitewashed, like Asian, and then like, you know, just Asian. And I guess there was definitely like pressure to conform there as well. You know, you had to like have like perfect academics, you know, start whatever club, whatever then. But then at the same time during the week at school, like everybody played sports, everybody, you know, was very American. There's definitely a balancing act with that as well. I mean, I experienced like very similar to what Alea was describing, how I kind of resented my Chinese side because I wanted to fit in, especially at school. And then that would just completely flip on weekends when I had to go to Chinese school. And I was like wanted to be as Chinese as I could. Yeah. Now looking back, I don't think, it was definitely, I guess, painful for a while, but I think now, especially with more attention to like Chinese and Asian issues, especially, I think it wasn't all bad. I think I've, figured out my place and where I am, like in terms of being Chinese American.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story as well. Like I don't really had that struggle because I moved to here when I was 18, but I've heard a lot of kids growing up in North America had that struggle or are still going through this struggle. And I'm very glad that you are here to share the stories so that I know that these people who are going through the journey would not feel like alone. But I'm pretty sure that they still need some support and they need the voices to be there so that they know that they have someone to back them up as well. So thank you, Kevin and Elia, for sharing the stories. They're very special to you and of course, very special to others as well. And I'd like to pose more questions in the chat box so that I can help you to, because I noticed that when I read through the stories, read through my questions, everyone was kind of confused. So here is the story about the next topic, gap and love. I would just read one of these questions. You may find that there are a lot of gaps between you and your parents, differences in the thoughts, actions, tastes, etc. And what are the factors that might have affected the differences? And what do you think and feel about these differences? And I know that some of you have already covered this topic, but please share more if you want to say anything. Okay. I will give you some time to read through these questions. Thank you.
I can just say something quick because I feel like I touched upon it mostly already. But one thing I wanted to add was that I think there is, of course, like, a weird spectrum where there's going to be a lot of like Asian American parents who are going to be perhaps more well off, and then there are people who, like my family, who didn't speak English and who still don't, and who was working in the warehouse, working in the restaurants, working in the factories, doing all this work, and in those cases, a lot of times, the kids and really just me in that circumstance are tasked with like so many other immigrant families, right, of like taking on extra jobs at a very young age to ensure survival, and all of that. And so I think that was both a blessing and a curse, right? Like, even though it was very difficult at the time, and even though I got really sick from just constantly overworking myself to the bone, I also learned a lot about like just how capable I can be. Like, I never felt like just because I'm young or whatever that I can't do something, because I had no other choice. I had to do it. And so it helped me a lot as I'm like, working on like nonprofit stuff now, or my own career, or even with schooling, where when there's a challenge, I do think that I approach it perhaps with a little more resilience that was garnered through those times. So.
Thank you. I totally agree with that. Like how we can foster the sense of resilience. That's one of the options after facing all of these challenges. Sometimes we don't have the strength to pull ourselves together, but once you're ready to step out of that dark feelings, you can find that resilience in yourself, and that's the amazing part about going through the difficulties. And does anyone else want to add more? And I saw a question for Kevin. It's about going to the Chinese school or the Chinese classes on the weekend.
Yeah, I think it was definitely important to go to learn, obviously like Chinese and to interact with other Chinese children because I didn't really have many in my town. Besides being beneficial, yeah, I think it was honestly just good to see where like how a lot of other Chinese children were doing, especially because we all like have been like experienced similar like childhoods and such. Yeah, I think it was definitely beneficial, but not to the point where, I mean, there's like a huge like balancing act you have to pull off, like with Chinese school taking up like the entire like Sunday. Don't have any other time like that day to do anything else. And I think it's definitely important to like understand that like, like we have a lot of other things going on and we shouldn't, just get like tunnel vision for like Chinese school. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess Kevin's point is that it is a very important part of us being Chinese American, but at the same time, it is not something that we have to do in the sense to prove that we're Chinese. I hope I didn't get your point wrong, but I guess that's what I got from your words. But yeah, if you want to add anything, and I saw Nick raised his hand.
Can I add something about that? So I went to Chinese school for I think 8 years probably, but then I started like refereeing soccer, so then that took up most of my Sunday. So like from like 9 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. I'd just be busy like playing sports. So then like I stopped going, but I'm still fluent in Chinese, and like it helps you like interact with other people in college. And like there's at NYU, I think the Chinese population or Asian population is like 20 or 30%, which is like massive compared to other schools. And it definitely helps you because you're able to talk in a different language and like communicate to the international kids.
Thank you for adding more on that question. Thank you. And all right, so there are more questions upcoming, and let's stick with the
I
topic.
can go for Gavin though if you want.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'll just go over like the questions. So what factors might affect the differences between like the gap between you and your parents? I think that the way that like my parents grew up, thinking like what they did or eating, like definitely just like affected their preferences. And like that wasn't the way I was raised. And like the activities that they did when they were younger aren't like what I do, because they just didn't have access to many of the things that I do. What do I feel about these differences? The way that like my parents acted in their childhood didn't really like play a big role in the way that I acted, because they like allowed me to do whatever I liked and like play whatever sports I liked or do whatever after school. And then do you think these differences could bring positive impacts on our lives? I guess yes. The way that my parents act around me, it like introduced me to a new culture, and like discovering like foods, because we would eat Chinese food once or twice or maybe like 3 times a week or like sometimes at night. And then it helped me like fit in and like accept others by being a part of like another community. And then how do your parents express their love? My parents like express their love by being like affectionate and like spending time with me. So like before I went to college, like me and my family would have like family dinner at least 3 or 4 times a week. And then I mentioned this earlier, but since I was in like 2nd grade, we would go on ski trips or snowboarding trips. But like through high school, like I didn't go on them as much because I just got busy with other sports. And then how do I express my love to them? I express my love by saying like I love you and like helping them around the house, occasionally like cooking for them, like doing what is told and like spending time with them. And then what I'm most happy about with my relationship with my parents is the freedom that my parents have given me. Like I was never really stressed out by performing in school or like, which is like common in like other students. But I was allowed to like live my own life, go out whenever I wanted, and like discover my passions like with support from my parents. So like I had business venture ideas like when I was younger, and my parents like supported me with like whatever money or like whatever time I needed to pursue those. And like school wise, like my parents just like expected me to like try hard and like get decent grades, I guess. And like over like with college, like they didn't really care where I went. I didn't really care either. I just applied. And like my entire life, like I was just told to like do my best.
That is a very supportive family culture, and I was very impressed at how you are trying to give back as well, at the same time like cooking for your families as well and being appreciative. Thank you. And anybody else want to jump in?
I can just answer the question. I can answer the question that someone said about like the high expectations from Chinese parents, like how high is too high, etc. I mean, I don't really think it's wrong to have high expectations for your child. Like I think like I think you should like, you know, like want your child to do great things and to be successful in their own way. But I think that a lot of it is like how you go about expressing those high expectations. Like I think like being really critical, like if your kid doesn't get an award or like doesn't or it doesn't get like a good grade and making them feel bad about that, or like making them feel bad about like not doing or like not being able to get like a certain math concept or not being the fastest like swimmer or runner or something is not like and just like, you know, hurting their self, it only hurts their self-esteem. And it doesn't help them. It only puts extra pressure on them. And I think is like a big cause of like anxiety that will last like way longer than their childhoods. But I do think that it helps more. I think I forget, someone was just saying about like you just like want your, or I think Nick was just saying about like wanting like parents wanting their kids to do their best. I feel like that's a much better way of going about it. Like you want your kids, like especially if they're passionate at something or it's something that's important, like to do their best. And that's definitely something to be focusing more so, and like pushing them and making sure that they're trying hard versus like having the goal be like a score or something. Like you just want them to, like, I think like that's a much better way. And so, and like I feel like, yeah, it's like not like performance based, but more like effort based. And then also, like I was mentioning earlier, and it's something like I really feel passionately about is like, I feel like Chinese parents a lot of times like put all their like happiness into their children, and like their children are like like how well their children do versus other children is like a big thing. And I think just making sure that your life has other ways for you to like, as a Chinese parent, to like gain happiness and to, you know, like that you derive, you know, like I don't know, like it's like just making sure like your life is not just your kid is I think really important. And I think it's hard for a lot of Asian parents to remember, but it's something that I think helps both you and your kid in the long run.
Thank you, Hannah. And I love how you, like what you said earlier on, like your life is not just about your kids. Like I think that's an insight that that all the parents all the parents will appreciate to hear about. And I saw Nick raising his hand as well.
Yeah, so there's a question in the comments that's to talk about playing video games and like the amount of time that you play video games. So like my roommate or my suite mate at college, like all he does all day is just play League of Legends, and like that's perfectly fine. When I was younger, in like elementary school, I was only limited to like watching like 2 hours or 3 hours of TV a day. And I could like watch whatever I wanted. And like video games wise, like when I was younger in like elementary school, I was only allowed to play like Xbox and Wii like on Thursdays through like Sundays, I guess. But like through like high school, like I played like 6 to 10 hours of video games a day some days. Like once COVID started, I played video games from like 5 p.m. to 5 in the morning every night. And like all my classes were on Zoom anyways. So like I think playing video games is perfectly fine. And like any amount is just whatever, as long as like you can balance like your social life, like sports, school, and like you get all your stuff done.
Onto what Nick was talking about. Yeah, I used to play a lot of video games. I just, like, as I got older, I think I just had less and less free time, until the point where it was more of like a chore to sit down and set aside that time to play video games than actually like enjoy them. I completely agree with Nick though. As long as you can balance it, I don't think there's like a time limit that you need to set, as long as, you know, your child is still getting all his work done, and I don't think it's much of an issue.
Thank you, Kevin and Nick. I think many of you have mentioned this term, this word balance, like Hannah was talking about, like how appropriate it would be to express the expectations you have for your kids. It's like all about balance as well. And Kevin and Nick had talked about playing video games. It's all about balancing as well. So I don't think the answers would be very like binary, like absolutely yes or no, but more about how you do it and in which situations you deliver this kind of messages. And I saw Aaliyah send some text out in the chat box as well. Do you want to add more to this conversation as well, like Leah?
I feel like I got most of the like important points there, and I'm sorry if I can't get to all the questions. I'm like pretty slow typer compared to my peers. But yeah, I think emphasizing that last point there of praising action over their achievements. And I gave the example like, oh, like, I'm so proud of you, you worked really hard for this, or like, I'm so proud that you went and applied for this scholarship or this competition, whatever the case may be, versus praise for achievements or like physical like medals and stuff. Like, oh, good job for getting first place. I'm so proud of you for winning this competition. So even though like the praise is still on the child, right? It tweaks the perception of, it tweaks, I'm sorry. It is 5 a.m. for me. I am not doing well. But it tweaks children's perception of where their parents place praise upon. Wow, that was a lot of keywords. And so if you praise their actions, right, then children perceive a positive association with their parents' praise and like working hard and being a go-getter and you know, following their own passions, versus if you praise their ranking and their grades and their, you know, achievements, then they place more emphasis, they place a more positive association, and therefore associate your parents' love and acceptance with like their achievements. And, you know, if they're getting first place or not, if they're being the best in the school, if they're getting good grades. And so like, it's a small change, but I think it's really important because I feel like positive association with like personal characteristics of being hardworking can then allow them to strive and go out in new territory with increased confidence, because there's this assurance that, oh, my parents will be proud of me because I worked hard at this, and not, I don't know if I should do this because if I don't get a good grade, if I don't become successful, then my parents might not be proud of me anymore. So I just shouldn't try at all. And so I think that small change of praise is very important.
Thank you, Leah. That's a great point. It is a great point. And my background is in education. As an educator, I had to, sorry, I saw Nick and Kevin raising their hands, but I really want to say something to this. It's like be careful with your praise. It's a very tricky thing. Like, I think many immigrant parents, when they move to the States or anywhere else, they would start to praise their kids more, but they pick up on the things that are more focused on the results. If the praise is more like results oriented, just like Aaliyah said, you might be raising a kid that will become a go-getter, and I think would be very helpful if it's focused on the character, or if it's focused on the progress rather than the results, it will be very helpful. And that's just something else. Sorry. And Nick and then Kevin, please jump in.
So actually, this is called fixed versus growth mindset. And at Stern, during orientation, we had a TED Talk that was shown about this by Eduardo Braceno, which I could send in the chat later. But it's actually supported by science that like telling your kids that like you tried your best if they don't do well, or like you can do better next time, or like instead of telling them like, oh, you suck, or like, wow, you like failed me. And like this is like relevant to my life too, because my parents did a little bit of both, I guess, because they're a little bit more traditional, slightly, not really, but like a little bit. So like, yeah, sometimes you felt a little bit down, but like after like high school started, they didn't really put pressure on me to perform in anything. And then I ended up like getting like 6 or 7 school records in running, and then like just pursuing biking on my own. And that was just like through my own competitiveness that like my parents brought me up doing. And then someone mentioned the positive effects of playing video games. You know, I don't really think like reaction time is or responsive time is like a change. Like I don't think that really matters. But it definitely helps you socially. Like I only play video games with my friends, and like on the weekends, like I'll hang out with them, and all we'll do is just like play video games for 12 or 15 hours straight. So I don't know. And like in college, we do the same thing. Like I'll go to my dorm and then I'll sit there and play video games on like a Monday night for like 4 or 5 hours. And like I can connect with like my high school friends as well. And then also kids in college who also brought their PlayStations to school or Xboxes. Like we just play Fortnite together, or like Call of Duty.
Thank you. And Kevin.
Oh, sorry, really quick. I think I'm going to get cut off because I'm at the library and they're about to close. But going back to the what Aaliyah was talking about like standards and Asian parents holding their kids to a high standard. I think my parents, the best thing that they did for me was teaching me how to hold myself to a standard. And I think, you know, obviously I had to be, you know, a certain age, and it was definitely in high school. But after that, I didn't get stressed from like them being disappointed in me. I was mainly just stressed out knowing that I could have done better for myself in whatever situation, whether it be like academically or athletically. And I think honestly, that's the most important thing, like teaching your kids to be like intrinsically motivated versus just like scared of you because, you know, they didn't get a certain score or whatever. And like, honestly, I think I've done better academically and like athletically after I learned to hold myself to a standard than just before when I was just scared of them. So, yeah. Also, sorry, I think I have to go like in like a minute or two. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the participation though. Thank you so much, Kevin. Bye. And thank you for the video. Yeah.
I just wanted to say really quick, that I added some extra stuff in the chat about various like answers to other questions as well. So I won't waste any more of other people's time by talking about it on video, but you can read it in the chat.
Yeah, no, Diana, you have all the time to share as well. Please, if you want to add more points, but is there anything else you would like to add there besides the things you have already sent in the chat box, Diana?
Not really. I guess just for the sake of the recording, I'll just say real quick. What I was just basically saying is that sometimes, like, I mean, of course, gaming could just be like a fun hobby for someone to do. And then for other people, like for my little brother, for example, I know it's like a way to sort of fill a gap in their life, especially if they're not getting the love and care that they should be getting. And so then they sort of want to like have a way to almost distract themselves. And so that's why like I'm glad to see that there's not like a vilification of gaming in this conversation, because yes, it can be addictive, and yes, it could have negative consequences. But if you go to a kid and you just say like, oh, stop gaming, why are you wasting your time, why are you being so lazy, etc., sometimes it's just going to make them want to, like they feel so bad that they feel like they need to distract themselves, and they go back to gaming even more. So, you know, being kind and empathetic about it, offering alternatives as suggestions, offering to do things with them, you know, all of these are other ways to approach it that I think are a lot healthier.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Diana, for bringing up that conversation. Like, I think I agree with you, like being empathetic with your kids is very important as well. Like being curious about what they are actually thinking about it, what's the reason behind gaming is very important. Like if you if the parents just jump in and say, hey, you're doing this because you're lazy, I think that will cut off the conversation for a very long time at least. And also I like how you were talking about there's alternative approach to deal with that. Like instead of saying no, there are other ways, like redirecting them to do something else will be very helpful as well. Thank you. And let's move on to the next topic. It's about challenges and journey, and I posted all the questions in the chat box as well, and our audiences can have a look as well. And I added one question someone raised earlier on what are the most difficult topics between you and your immigrant parents, and that's a great one. I have an answer to one, like a parent's question from Ting Ting Rui about what would your parents do if they were worried about you or believed that you were in trouble. My parents were like very hands off, so like they would make me just deal with my own problems, I guess. Or like if they had an actual issue with what I was doing, they would just like ask me about it. And then like I'd just be aware of whatever is happening and like figure it out myself. Thank you for sharing. And Diana, please.
Wow, I feel like I'm such a boomer, not a zoomer, because for some reason I suddenly forgot how to do the raise hand thing. And I literally went to Zoom University. Like I graduated in May, so I don't know what's going on with my brain. But point being, sort of like what Nick said, right? Like I think it's, wow, I went on a tangent and now I forgot what I was going to say. Nick, what did you just say?
About
oh, yes, thank you. I remember now. Just hearing your voice like reminded me. Okay, thank you for that audio reminder. Okay, basically what I was going to say is I think a lot of times the issue comes down to we go into these situations and conversations feeling like we need to know how to solve the issue. And so there's a lot of fear and stress involved from both ends. And a lot of times the pressure comes across not necessarily even because you as a parent is trying to push pressure onto your kids, but because you're stressed about how to best approach the situation, and then they get the spillover effects of your confusion and stress. And so what I like to say, at least with my Letters to Strangers work, and I say this in response to, you know, people talking about how to support someone with a mental health concern, is that your role is not to be the knight in shining armor. Your role is not to slay that fire-breathing dragon, to perfectly know the answer to every single thing in the universe. And that's a good thing. It means you don't have that burden. What's more effective oftentimes is to walk alongside that person, whether that be your child or even someone else in your family, to let them lead the way to where they want to go, but to be that sort of partner in crime with them. So like, for example, really focusing on active listening, when they're talking about these things that they might be struggling with, instead of just saying, okay, now let's solve this right away. Because maybe what they need is not a solution from you. Maybe they've already thought about a lot of the solution suggestions that you were going to make. Instead, maybe what they just wanted was for you to listen, to feel like they're heard, to feel like you care. And then afterwards, if there is something that you could do, you can ask them you can explicitly ask them a suggestion, rather than just being like, oh, let me know if there's anything I can do, because that can feel very empty, and then they don't want to pressure you or like put that burden on you. But instead offer like an explicit suggestion, like, well, I know you say you're struggling a bit with social media. So do you want me to help keep timing for you? Like keep a watch, like a timer to stopwatch to remind you when it's been 30 minutes since you've been scrolling. And then you can offer the suggestion. And then that way, if they reject it, then whatever, it's fine. But now they know that you genuinely care and that you are actually actively there to support them. I hope that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I was just busy at typing what you said down and send that to the chat box. I really love what you said, and I'm very impressed. But I don't want to steal the thunder. And Aliyah, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to heavily emphasize what Diana just said. So currently, I'm a volunteer at this crisis chat center called I'm Alive, which basically is like a crisis help center for anybody and everybody who needs, some help, some reassurance or anything like that, where chatters can anonymously be connected with a trained volunteer and, help. The volunteer is trained to help guide them to, process, understand, and kind of sometimes even de-escalate suicidal intentions or ideations. And what I've learned through the months of volunteer work is a lot of the times people who come to those chat centers, they feel utterly alone because they feel like they have no one to talk to. And it is amazing how impactful active listening and just being there with that person can do for them, even complete strangers. A lot of the time, once at the end of the chat, they'll be like, thank you for listening to me. I didn't think that anybody would want to hear. And it's really sad to hear that because, everyone has at least someone, right? But, what Diana said about it's not about having all the answers. It's about being there with them through the journey and letting them know that you're there for them whenever they may need to.
Thank you so much. I didn't hear the end. I think it got cut off or something. Sorry. But thank you all for sharing all of this stories and all your personal insights. And I'm very grateful again for every single one of you. It's very, some of these thoughts are very personal to you, but you're here and being willing to share it. It's amazing. And also, Leah, you got up so early to be here with us. I'm very appreciative for that. And I'm aware of the time, so now I'm just going to pose another question, pile of questions here. Bridge and understanding. What have you done to bridge the gap between you and your parents? And
can I respond to both questions, like the previous one as well? So my parents were never really overprotective, and like they let me experiment and learn from my mistakes. So like throughout all of high school, there was maybe like a handful, maybe less than 10 weekends where I was home the entire weekend. And then after school, I would be at practice or be hanging out with friends or at the gym until 8 or 9 some nights. And then on the weekends, I was basically allowed to do whatever I wanted, like hang out with whoever I wanted. Basically, as long as like my parents like knew that I was safe. And then there weren't really any challenges with like independence, since like my parents were also very busy. So I just learned how to like take care of myself. And that made the transition to college pretty easy for me, just because I had the freedoms and like skills from high school. And then my relationship with my parents has always been pretty strong. Like we have disagreements here and there, but like I never really stepped out of line. I respected their space and like they respected mine. And like just by like being able to do whatever I want on the weekends, like I learned like my limits and like how to take care of myself. And then something that I think is difficult for most Asian parents to understand is also mental health. So like my parents, their view on mental health is just to be strong and like not show like failure when something is wrong. And like they never really understood like me or my sister in terms of mental health. But like over time, like they started to learn, but like never really acknowledged that it's an actual problem. So in high school, I was president of a club that creates mental health awareness. And my parents were like my role models. So like they protected me in terms of like reality of like seeing failure and emotions, and like prevented me from like accepting that like being failure is like failing is like fine. And a couple of weeks ago, I watched a video about this CEO coach in Ironman, who lost his son Ryan to a battle with depression. And the takeaway was basically that he never really showed weakness and like protected his son from what was happening around him, which in turn took a toll on his son, and leading for him to kill himself. And then in terms of bridging the gap between me and then I'll send the video in the chat. But in terms of bridging the gap between me and my parents, the most important thing I've done is just spending time with them, and then like talking to them.
Thank you for, and I saw another great question posted by one of our audiences. And they asked if any one of you can give more examples about how to be there for the kids. And yeah. And also, Diana, I saw you turn your mic on again. I don't know if it's.
Oh no, sorry. I just have it always on. I have my mic has like a base that allows me to mute it this way, so it's easier for me to just mute it here. Yeah, but I can say something real quick, which is just I think ultimately, being very open with them is a huge thing. It's sort of like the story that Nick was just telling, but I think in addition to, having that presence with your kids when it's clear that they are struggling and they want to talk to you about something, sometimes they don't even know if they can talk to you about that something. So you need to create and foster a sort of environment in your home where they feel like it's safe and accepted to have those conversations. And the best way to do that is to lead by example. We are all human beings, and I'm sure that you as a parent will still have your days when you're struggling with things. And I'm not saying you have to be like, crying buckets of tears in front of your kids. But what I am saying is that when you're feeling those things, you can bring that naturally to like the dinner table. Say like, I gotta say, today was kind of tough at work. I was struggling with a coworker being just kind of annoying. How did you feel today? And sometimes they'll feel a lot more comfortable sharing their day with you once they know that like you are okay with talking about your emotions. So clearly it's okay for them to talk about their emotions as well. And I think this is especially important when it comes to Asian dads who are more likely to have a very stoic attitude, and have some of those like internalized ideas about masculinity and not showing feelings and such. Ultimately, I always say like it's better to maybe take a little hit to your ego for now than to, cry actually when something really terrible happens with your family members because you didn't want to have those conversations when they needed to happen. So.
Well said, Diana. It's really like, I love how you are consistently bringing up more very key, like important terms about this conversation, like the toxic masculinity, and speaking of role modeling, like being open about our own emotions would really help our kids to be open about that as well. Yeah. And I saw Aaliyah and Hannah trying to ask something as well.
I just go for the question about bridging the gap. I think similar to Nick, I tried to, bridge the gap by just spending time with my parents. I think I went to college not very close to where I grew up, and so I didn't see them a lot then, but now that I'm closer to them, I try to go home more often and just like spend time with them either on the weekends or just whenever I'm free, or sometimes they'll come out for dinner. And I think that just having that quality time and like letting them know that I'm like still thinking of them and making time for them is like a great way as well, just to show love, as was asked in a different question. And in terms of, I think, bridging the gap with your kids, I think a big part of that is just really trying to learn about what's going on in your kids' lives besides just like how they're doing in school, or, those like the typical things to ask, and just, like trying to find out what their interests are and like learning about them, or having them listen to, or having them like tell you about it, and like really trying to, just to care about the things that make them them, and getting to know them as a person rather than just like as your child. I think that that's like really helpful, and it's something that definitely I can see being just a great way to connect with your child. And then also trying to understand their points of view. Like I definitely there are lots of issues where like my parents and I have like different perspectives, and like I think that instead of just thinking that, like I think parents, especially Asian parents, a lot of time think that like they're right, and that their children just like don't have the life experience yet, or like don't have the perspective. But I think that just trying to empathize with like your child's point of view learning and trying to understand where they're coming from is super important, and a great way to let them know that they're being heard.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah, for talking about active listening. And I also, what you said, like it reminds me of what Diana mentioned earlier on. Like she was talking about, as a parent, your responsibility is not about knowing everything. Like once you take that burden off from your shoulder, maybe it will help. Like it will be very helpful for you to step, make a step closer to your kids, to feel like, oh, and once I don't have all of this burden on my shoulders, maybe I can talk to them really like without all of this authorities, and that could make the conversations easier. And Aaliyah, do you have anything to share as well?
I'm going to try to answer 2 of the questions in the chat. The first one, we kind of touched on how to be there more for your kids. Something that I like to do is just have like a mental check-in with my friends and sometimes my parents, where I will just text my friend and be like, hey, mental health check-in time, like, how are you doing? Let me know. I'm here for you if you need me. And, like 90% of the time, I'd say, my friends will text back and be like, hey, like, thank you so much for, thinking of me and letting me know that you're here. Like, I'm doing pretty good at the moment, but I really appreciate you checking in on me. And, there'll be 10% of the time where I'll get a response from my friend and they'll be like, you know what? No, I haven't been all right. Finals have been really stressing me out. And I don't think like I could really use someone. And I didn't realize how much I was struggling until you checked in on me. So thanks for doing that. I think, yeah, just the emphasis on letting your kid know that you're there for them when you need them. And if they're doing good, then, more power to them. The second question I'd like to address is Sanders' question in the chat. Do you want your family to talk about Chinese American identity in general? Do you feel like you've received enough support from Chinese society and general society for your growth and youth as a Chinese American? I definitely think that the idea of the Chinese American identity is something that should be discussed within all Chinese American households, especially because I don't feel like our school system right now is equipped, let's say, for having such discussions, especially because having an Asian American identity is something uniquely Asian American, and is different than having, let's say, Latino culture. But I feel like, having the support of your parents and just sitting them down and being like, let's talk about like this. And it doesn't have to be very formal. It can be something shared around the dinner table, and just like bouncing around like, so like, how are you doing in school? And how is this like, how is your Chinese American identity? Like, how are you dealing with that? And what do you think of that? And sometimes you'd be surprised with the answers that kids will come up with, because I've asked this question a couple times to some kids that I like mentor, and a lot of them give quite detailed answers. They're like, it's great, but I'm feeling some conflict and struggle with how Chinese I am or how American I am. And it's amazing to see how kind of, not specific, but like how attuned they are to society and their parents and their place within Chinese versus American society. I'm talking a lot.
No, it's perfectly fine. Thank you so much. And Diana, you're raising your hand as well.
Yes, my brain suddenly worked again. I remembered how to do this. But yeah, I just wanted to say that I love some resources because I know we're talking a lot about like, Chinese American identity and how to have these conversations. So first things first, Letters to Strangers. Our website is letterstostrangers.org. Tomorrow, October 10th, is World Mental Health Day, and we're going to be launching a free YouTube series on race, ethnicity, and mental health, particularly in the US. And this first video that we're launching tomorrow is on the Asian American Pacific Islander population. So I would highly recommend you or your kids check it out because I think it'll address a lot of these things that you want to hear about, and you'll go into it in more nuance than I can on this call here. Second thing is I also left this in the chat, but I know Maggie is on this call. I'm not sure if she's still running it these days, but NAMI, New Jersey, National Alliance on Mental Illness, they run this program called CAMHOP, aka Chinese American Mental Health Outreach Program. And it's really fantastic to have like that sort of peer support and community. And then for those of you with relatives in San Francisco, my friend Iling Peng, she's a Chinese American mother. She runs the Mental Health Association for Chinese communities there. So all sorts of really wonderful resources that I wish was promoted more. That's why I'm kind of like spotlighting them now. These are just people I've personally worked with and know, and I can be proud to share information on.
Thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing resources. And Nick, you have something to say?
Lucy Liu asked a question that was, has growing up in the USA as a Chinese American ever challenged or bothered me? I would say yes and no. So earlier, when I was younger, like I didn't really like have like a specific friend group or like a group of friends that I always like hung out with. But like I feel like if you blame your problems on like being a Chinese American, like why you don't fit in or like this or that, that's just like an escape. And like with my parents letting me be more independent through high school, like I learned how to interact with others, and like just like was able to like associate with others fine. So like it's challenged me in the way that I didn't necessarily know like how to interact with others when I was younger. just because like I guess my parents, like the way that they taught me, but like over time, like if you like, it's basically just like if you blame your issues on it, like I feel like it's just like an escape. Like it's simple to just fit in if you like know how to interact.
I do have to slightly disagree with that, Nick. Just because I think it would also heavily depend on the community that you grow up with. Like I grew up in a town that was 80% white and that had like 2 other Asians in my entire surroundings. And so when the people around you have like never seen an Asian face before, or like I got told constantly because I was wearing red shoes, red clothes, that because I was wearing the color red, I must be so communist, I must be so brainwashed, even when I was in 4th or 5th grade. I think when you're at that, like I think that especially when you're young, it's hard to know what that means in terms of your self-worth. And if you don't know any better and everyone around you is telling you those things, it can be difficult to really just quote unquote overcome that. So I totally get what you're saying, but I think it does have some nuance to it.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a 95% white community, and through all my entire life, my friend group through high school is 40 Jewish kids, 1 Hispanic kid who's half Latino and Irish. And then I was like the only Asian kid in my friend group. But like, I never really faced any like outwards racism or like anything like against Chinese American.
That's very lucky for you. But also like, especially because I was, I had a very thick accent and I had really bad grammar coming here because I spoke no English. I had to learn it completely from scratch. And my parents didn't speak any English either, so they couldn't become friends with the other families' parents. I think that's just, I'm not saying that your experience is invalid at all. That's totally not what I mean. I just wanted to provide another perspective, just because I don't want people to walk away thinking that if their kid is not able to overcome it, then it's just purely the child's own issue.
Yeah, I mean, my parents also came to the US like not knowing how to speak English, and like their college experience is completely different than mine. Like they were never really involved in like the social scene in terms of like Greek life or being involved in just like interacting with different races of people, just because they were in the middle of learning English. But from where I lived, like I grew up since I was 3, being with the same kids, the same 120 kids in my grade, all the way until through senior year. So like we all knew each other, and like it was just like a normalized part of like in terms of my life.
I love this conversation so much. When Diana said I slightly disagree with you, I know that's the point that we start to have a lot of more. We have some opportunity to see the full story, and that's what I love about humanity. Is like we human beings are very complicated. We have different backgrounds. We go through very different scenarios, and that shape like all of these experiences shape our understanding of things in very different ways. And it's not about arguing who's right or wrong, but more like showing like the other side of the story, so that we can see what is it actually like for the whole society. But anyway, I have no idea what I'm talking about right now, but I hope someone can get my idea of it. And I'm very aware of time. We slightly go over the time already, but I still want to say that I'm very thankful for having all of you here today to share all of this insightful stories. And before I wrap up this conversation, can I invite every single one of you to share 1 to 2 sentences about the action or the suggestion the action that you would suggest the parents to take to bridge the gap or like become closer with their kids. Yeah, it will be hard in just 1 or 2 sentences.
Well, everything I would want to say, I wrote into the Letters to Strangers Youth for Youth Mental Health Guidebook, which is for free to download in black and white online. If you want it, I'll put the link in the chat. So that and the video tomorrow coming out will hopefully say more than I can in 2 sentences.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of these resources and creating this platform. It's very helpful. And Aaliyah, sorry about that. Aaliyah, do you have anything to share as well?
Yeah, I feel like I can't really emphasize enough like how important it is to let your kids know that you're there for them. But I feel like, you know, just, yeah, letting them know you're there for them if they ever need you, and, you know, having them, like, getting that conversation in and connecting with them on just, like, parent to child, and as they grow older, like a peer-to-peer level.
I agree. Have that strong will to be there for your kids and spend time with them would be very helpful already. Thank you. And Nick.
Yeah. So my main like takeaway is that you should learn to like how to interact with your child in a way that isn't demeaning and like puts them down. But like to help them be better the next time and be independent in the future. Like one big thing that I've seen this year in college is like kids in high school who weren't allowed to like necessarily go out or like go hang out with friends on the weekends or just like experiment with drinking basically. And then they get to school and the first week like they black out multiple times because they just don't know how much they're supposed to drink, or like haven't ever like experimented with like I'm not gonna say drugs, but basically that. So like just like let your kid like this is what my parents' mentality has always been, like let your child experiment and let them be independent, let them learn like how to interact with others and how to be a part of society.
Yeah, we learn from the experiences. So sometimes the parents need to be hands off. But I guess at some point there's some boundaries as well. But sorry, you were saying something?
Wait, I forgot. Give me like 2 seconds.
Sure.
Like the main part of like drinking in high school is like, would you rather have your kids like vomiting like in your house, or would you rather have them like passed out in front of a bar, like going to a hospital, and then you have to pay thousands in hospital fees for them to either pump your stomach or you just lay there and they give you Advil?
Interesting point. Thank you for sharing that as well. And know that this Fishbowl discussion is mainly for our panelists, but I want to add one thing, as I have experienced something similar to Diana, and the turning point for me was that like I had a lot of struggles with my parents, and at some point I attempted suicidal like actions multiple times as well. But the turning point was that my dad started to trying to communicate with me in different languages. What I mean is that it's not like he's speaking multiple languages. He's only able to speak Mandarin, but he tried to communicate with me by writing letters or sending me short poems or sharing the articles he saw somewhere else. Those are the ways that he was trying to say I love you, and this really helped me to overcome all of these difficulties and the traumas that I experienced with my parents in our relationship. And I'm very thankful for every one of you, and thank you for sharing your insights about the ideas how to foster a kid and how to learn along with them. And also, I really appreciate the concrete examples that you gave, like to help all of the audiences, the parents, to know how could they turn the ideas into the action. So thank you so much. And I will invite our audiences to share some thankful notes with our speakers. And yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to wrap up by sharing the slides about our our PCE, and also there's some reminders. Today we will have the keynote speaker speech about conversation. So what we have been talking about today in this section about communicating with your kids, you're going to hear more insights about this topic. And we would love to encourage you to have a look at our new website. You can find a lot of resources, informations, and hopefully we can add Diana's resources. Maybe we can add that on this website as well. We'll figure out how to do it. And
thank you.
And also we have this WeChat groups that all of our audiences can just join, and it's free. And also you can post your questions there. We have a lot of volunteers and will be there to answer your questions as soon as possible. And we also have a lot of great, wonderful courses available to help you to learn about parenting and growing with your kids step by step. And I like to go through our sponsors slides once more just to show our appreciation. And thank you all for being here today. Thank you so much. And Jianping or any other, Laura, Linda, want to say something else?
没有什么了，就是再次感谢所有的 panelists 和那个主持人 Karen 非常感动人的这些分享。下面就是可能有一个比较长时间的 break， 8点到9点会回来，谢谢。